The billionaire had spent for years searching for her. She had spent 3 years trying to disappear. Neither of them knew the storm would put them in the same room, on the same freezing night, with a debt neither of them could see coming due before sunrise. Welcome to Kindness Miracles. Stay with us until the end tonight, this one earns it. Let's begin. The bell above Suds's wash and fold jingled weak and thin against the wind, barely audible over the roar of a blizzard tearing off Lake Superior. It was 1:47 in the morning. Renata Vosk didn't look up right away. Strangers stumbling in off Highway 61 during a storm like this weren't unusual: truckers, stranded motorists, the occasional dock worker waiting out a delayed shift change. What made her look up the second time was the silence. The man standing just inside the door wasn't stamping snow off his boots or heading for the vending machine. He was simply staring at her, soaked through, no hat, no gloves, coat dripping onto Odette's linoleum floor like he'd forgotten his body was cold. "Machines are in the back," Renata said, nodding toward the dryers without much interest. "Change machine's broken, though." "Sorry." He didn't move. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice unsteady in a way that didn't match the expensive cut of his ruined coat. "I know this is strange. It's really you, isn't it?" Renata's hand stilled on the sweatshirt she was folding. Every instinct she'd built over 3 years of staying invisible, from debt collectors, from an insurance dispute that never fully closed, from her old life she'd worked hard to bury, rose up at once. "I don't know you," she said flatly. "You're right. You don't." He swallowed. "My name is Callum Reyes. I think you used to work in the trauma department at St. Alistair. About 4 years ago." The name of the hospital landed like a dropped plate. Renata's jaw tightened. "I don't work there anymore. Whatever you're selling, whatever this is." "You hummed to her," Callum said quietly, the words coming out like they'd been rehearsed 100 times and still weren't ready. "In a hospital bathroom. 4 years ago. She never learned your name." She only remembered the humming. Renata went completely still. She hadn't let herself think about that bathroom floor in a long time, not because she'd forgotten, but because remembering it usually meant remembering everything that came after. A 19-year-old girl shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Renata off the clock, off protocol, unwilling to walk away. An old lullaby she hadn't meant to hum out loud. "Anna," she whispered, before she could stop herself. Callum's breath caught audibly, and for a moment the only sound in the laundromat was the dryers turning, and the wind clawing at the windows, and a man who had spent for years and 3 private investigative firms finally standing in front of the one piece of evidence none of them could find. He hadn't planned to end up here tonight. His SUV had broken down on Highway 61 in the same storm now rattling Suds's windows, and his driver, an old dockhand named Warren who'd known the Reyes family for 30 years, had followed the only lit sign visible through the whiteout. Callum hadn't grown up rich. His father had worked the cargo cranes at the very terminal his company now owned outright, and some part of him, the part that still flinched at the smell of diesel and lake water, had never quite believed he belonged in the version of his life that came after the money did. Tonight, standing in a laundromat 2 blocks from the docks his father used to work, that belief felt thinner than it had in years. Before we go further, if this story is already pulling at something in you, that's exactly why we tell them. Take a second, hit like, subscribe if you're new here, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Now let's find out what it cost both of them to get to this room. Renata didn't cry. She didn't even sit down. She crossed her arms over her stained grey hoodie like it was the only armor she had left. "Is she alive?" Renata said. Not a question, exactly. A demand. "She's alive," Callum said. "She's 23. She's in graduate school." His voice cracked slightly. "She's the one who sent me looking for you. Not to reward you. She said she wouldn't believe I'd actually changed until I found you and said it to your face." "Then why didn't anyone look for years ago?" Renata's voice came out sharper than she intended, and she didn't apologize for it. "You had 3 investigative firms. I had 1 appeal form and a disconnected phone line. Nobody came looking for me when my son needed his hearing aids fixed. Nobody came looking when I was scrubbing office floors at midnight because a hospital needed a name to put on an incident report. Callum didn't flinch, which surprised her. I know, he said. That's not an excuse. I'm not here to give you one. Renata studied him for a long moment, the soaked coat, the exhausted eyes, the complete absence of security detail or entourage that should have surrounded a man worth $11 billion. Something about the incongruity of it made her lower her arms, just slightly. Why now, she said. Why tonight? Because Anna finally told me the whole truth 6 months ago, and it took me this long to find you. He rubbed a hand over his face. You should know, she almost didn't want me to look. She found your name once, on her own, 2 years ago. A record search. Suspended nursing license. She thought it meant you'd hurt someone. She stopped looking because she was afraid of what she'd find. Something in Renata's chest cracked at that, not anger this time, just old, tired grief. I never hurt anyone, she said quietly. I took the blame for a mistake 3 other people made, because the person who actually misread the chart was 22 years old and about to lose everything, and I was already the one they decided to punish either way. I believe you, Callum said. I've read the file. Then you know it wasn't a clean story, Renata said. Nothing about that year was clean. Outside, the wind slammed against the windows hard enough to rattle the glass in its frame. Somewhere in the back, a dryer buzzer went off, and neither of them moved to answer it. Odette, behind the counter, had gone very still, dish towel forgotten in her hands. A dock worker named Desmond, mid-fold on a stack of flannel shirts, had stopped entirely, watching the two of them the way people watch a scene they instinctively know they shouldn't interrupt. You want to know what that year actually looked like, Renata said, her voice lower now, less armored. I'll tell you, since you clearly went digging through a file instead of asking me directly. I worked 29 hours straight the night it happened. 2 call-outs before my own shift even started, then a multi-vehicle accident flooded the ER on top of it. Somebody wrote an ambiguous dosage on a chart in the middle of the chaos, a pharmacy tech barely out of school misread it, and it never should have reached me at all. When it got caught, before anyone was hurt, I want that on the record, the hospital needed a name. The doctor had connections on the board. The tech was 22 and about to lose everything over a mistake 3 other systems failed to catch. So I let them put my name on it instead. Callum listened without interrupting, which she noticed, and appreciated more than she expected to. The review took over a year, Renata continued. By the time they cleared me of actual negligence, St. Alastair had already replaced me, and no hospital within 300 miles wanted a nurse with a suspension on her file, cleared or not. So I cleaned office buildings at night. 3 of them. And when the dryers in my building broke, which was often, because my landlord treats maintenance like a rumor, I hauled my son's laundry 6 blocks through the cold to this exact building. I didn't know most of that, Callum admitted quietly. The file had the outcome. Not the reasons. Files usually don't, Renata said. That's most of the problem, if you ask me. Renata's phone buzzed against the folding table. She glanced at it, and her expression changed, not toward Callum, but toward something colder and more immediate. I have to go, she said, already reaching for her laundry bags. What is it? She hesitated, then decided she didn't owe this man an explanation, and told him anyway, mostly out of exhaustion. My son. Micah. He's 9. He's deaf. His hearing aid processors need a software reset every few months or they stop functioning correctly in classroom settings, background noise, group instruction, all of it. The school flagged it as overdue. If I don't clear the balance with the audiology office by 8 a.m., they pull his classroom support device until it's paid, and he sits through an entire day of school not understanding a word anyone says. Her voice hardened. That text was my sister. The office opens in 6 hours and I'm $340 short. Micah had been deaf since birth, and Renata had learned sign language the way she learned everything, fast, out of necessity, practicing hand shapes in a cracked bathroom mirror at 2 in the morning back when he was barely 2 years old and the diagnosis still felt like the end of something instead of the beginning of it. She'd never let him see how frightened she'd been. By the time he was old enough to notice fear, she'd already turned hers into something else, a fierce, quiet competence that colored everything she did for him, including, tonight, the particular steel in her voice as she calculated exactly how many hours stood between her and a locked-out classroom device. Callum reached instinctively for his coat pocket, and Renata caught the motion before he finished it. "Don't," she said. "Don't pull out a checkbook like this is the part where you fix it. I've had 4 years of people looking at me and Micah like we're a problem that needs a number attached to it. I'm not doing that tonight. Not with you." Callum lowered his hand slowly. "Okay," he said. "Then tell me what you need instead of what I assume you need." Renata stared at him, thrown slightly off balance by the question. Nobody had asked her that in a long time. "I need 6 hours and a car that isn't buried in a snowbank," she said finally. "And I need you to still be standing here when I get back, because I have questions, and you owe me answers before you owe me anything else." Callum's driver, an old dockhand named Warren who'd been idling outside for 20 minutes wondering if his employer had lost his mind, pulled the SUV around without being asked twice. She returned just after 5 in the morning, snow still clinging to her coat, the audiology balance cleared, Micah's classroom device secured for another semester. Callum was still there, exactly as promised, 2 coffees from the gas station across the street sitting untouched on the folding table because he hadn't known if she took sugar. "You could have left," Renata said, sitting down across from him. "I told you I would be here." "People say that." "I know," Callum said. "I spent a long time being one of them. That's part of why I'm here." He slid a folder across the table, not a check, she noted, but a folder. "I want to offer you a position. Director of Worker Health and Family Support, at my company's foundation. Full salary befitting the role, full benefits, real authority to change how frontline workers get treated when something goes wrong that isn't fully their fault." Renata didn't open the folder. "You're offering me a job because you feel guilty. I'm offering you a job because your file has 11 years of trauma nursing and a dozen commendations before one bad night, a broken system pinned entirely on you. I looked at what our own foundation does for its workers right now. It's mediocre. I built the shipping side of this company with my hands and outsourced the human side to people who write reports nobody reads." He paused. "I don't want to rescue you. I want to hire you." "That's a good line," Renata said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. "You practiced that one." "I did," Callum admitted. "Doesn't make it untrue." "Tell me what's actually wrong with your foundation, then," Renata said. "Not the mission statement. The real thing." Callum exhaled slowly. "Workers report an incident, and half the time the case gets closed faster than it gets investigated. We have a healthcare partnership program across 41 facilities, and I couldn't tell you, off the top of my head, what happens to a single mother who gets blamed for something that wasn't fully her fault. I built the ships. I never once asked who was steering them when something went wrong." "That's closer to true," Renata said. Renata finally opened the folder, scanning it with the clinical efficiency of someone who used to review hospital policy for a living. Her eye stopped on a section near the back. "This foundation partners with an insurer called Anchor Mutual for your worker health claims administration." "That's right. Anchor Mutual handled St. Alastair's malpractice liability the year I lost my license," Renata said slowly, something shifting behind her eyes. "I remember the name because they closed my internal review in 11 days. 11 days, Mr. Reyes, for a case that should have taken months. I always wondered why." Callum went quiet in a way that told her he hadn't known that until this exact second. "I don't know anything about that," he said carefully. "But I'm going to find out tonight." It took Warren for phone calls and one very irritated night shift compliance officer to confirm what Renata suspected. Anchor Mutual didn't just insure St. Alastair Medical Center. It was also the primary underwriter for Reyes Maritime's entire shipping fleet, a client relationship worth enough that Anchor Mutual had, for years, quietly prioritized fast, low-cost resolutions on any claim connected to institutions in their portfolio, to keep their loss ratios attractive to their biggest corporate accounts. Renata's medication error case had been one of those claims. Instead of a full investigation into staffing failures at St. Alastair, Anchor Mutual had pushed the hospital toward the cheapest, fastest resolution available, name one experienced nurse, close the file, avoid a larger systemic finding that might have triggered a bigger payout down the line. Renata read the compliance summary Warren printed at the all-night copy shop 2 doors down, her hands not quite steady. For a moment, she said nothing at all, just stared at the page like it might rearrange itself into something less true. 11 days, she said finally. I remember being told it was closed fast because the board wanted to be fair to me. Move quickly, minimize the damage to my record, they said. I actually thanked the case manager for that. I sat in that woman's office and thanked her. A short, humorless laugh escaped her. I thanked the system for closing the door on me quickly. Renata. Don't, she said, holding up a hand. Let me say this part. Your company didn't do this to me on purpose. I believe that. But your company's money made it cheaper and faster for a hospital to sacrifice me instead of fixing what was actually broken. And you've been sending checks to that same insurer every year since, without ever asking what happens to the people on the other end of their fast, cheap resolutions. I didn't know, Callum said. I believe you didn't know, Renata said. That's almost worse. It means it didn't matter enough to ask. She stood up, sliding the folder back across the table, unsigned. Something in her had gone cold and final, the particular calm of someone who has decided to protect herself the only way she knows how, by leaving before the leaving is done to her instead. I can't work for a foundation funded by the same money that helped bury my case, she said. I won't be someone's redemption story built on top of the exact system that hurt me. Find someone else to fix this. She picked up her laundry bags and walked toward the door, and for the first time all night, Callum let her get halfway there before he spoke again. Renata didn't go straight home. She walked 6 blocks through the tail end of the storm to her sister's apartment, sat on the edge of the pull-out couch where Micah was sleeping, and let herself feel, for exactly 10 minutes, something she hadn't let herself feel in front of Callum, not gratitude, not relief, but a raw, unglamorous resentment that she wasn't proud of and didn't try to talk herself out of. It wasn't fair, she thought, that his daughter's crisis was the thing that finally moved the world to look at what happened to her. It wasn't fair that a stranger with 3 investigative firms could locate a person in 8 hours that an entire hospital system had spent for years pretending didn't exist. She let the unfairness sit there, ugly and true, instead of dressing it up as something nobler. Then she went back to Suds's, because underneath the resentment was something else, the old instinct that used to pull her toward a frightened girl on a bathroom floor even when it cost her something to stay. Then help me end the relationship with Anchor Mutual, Callum had said. Publicly. On the record. Not because it fixes what happened to you or nothing fixes that, but because if I don't do it now, knowing what I know, I'm exactly the kind of person you just described. And I'd rather lose the contract than keep being that person. Renata stopped at the door, hand on the frame, snow blowing sideways past the glass behind her. That will cost you, she said. Boards don't like admitting their biggest insurer helped bury a malpractice case. I'm aware, Callum said. I called our general counsel 20 minutes ago and told her to start drafting the termination letter. She's already told me our board chairman is going to fight it in the morning. By 7 a.m., Grant Ashworth, chairman of the Reyes Maritime Foundation Board, was on speakerphone from a time zone 3 hours behind them, and he was not pleased. You want to sever a 9-figure underwriting relationship, publicly, over one nurse's malpractice file from 4 years ago, Ashworth said, his voice tight with the particular calm of a man used to being obeyed. Callum, I understand the sentiment. I don't understand the business case. This isn't redemption. This is liability exposure with a press conference attached. It's not a press conference, Callum said. It's an audit. A public one. of every claim Anchor Mutual has fast-tracked involving our partner institutions in the last 6 years. If there's one Renata Vosk, there are others. You don't know that. I know, I never asked, Callum said. That's on me. It's not going to stay on me. Ashworth's voice sharpened. You hired a stranger you met in a laundromat 8 hours ago to redesign healthcare policy for 11,000 employees, and now you want to torch a major financial relationship on her recommendation. The board will not approve this without significant pushback, and you know it. Then let them push back, Callum said. I'll bring the audit request to the full board myself, on the record, and I'll bring Ms. Vosk's file with me. If anyone on that board wants to explain to my face why an 11-day closure on a nurse's malpractice case is acceptable business practice, I'll listen. I don't think anyone will volunteer. You're making this personal. It's already personal, Callum said. It was personal the moment my daughter almost died in a bathroom and a stranger stayed with her because nobody else did. I just didn't know how far the rot went until tonight. Renata, listening from across the table, finally spoke, her voice steady in the exact way it used to be steady in a trauma bay full of panicking residents. Mr. Ashworth, she said. I'm not asking your company to do this for me. I'm telling you that somewhere in your claims data is a night nurse, or a night shift factory worker, or a warehouse hand, whose case got closed in 11 days because it was cheaper than doing it right. I don't need you to believe me. I need you to look at the data, because I already know what you'll find. There was a long pause on the line. Who is this? Ashworth said. The woman you're about to hire, Renata said. Callum, despite everything, allowed himself the first real smile of the night. It took 11 days, the same number, Renata noted grimly, as the days it had taken to close her own case, for the internal audit to return preliminary findings. Anchor Mutual had fast-tracked 41 claims across Reyes Maritime's partner institutions over 6 years, disproportionately closing cases involving lower-wage employees, nurses, warehouse staff, dock hands, delivery drivers. 7 of those cases, on closer review, showed clear signs of institutional failure wrongly pinned on a single low-level worker. The findings landed on Callum's desk on a Thursday morning, and he called Renata before he'd finished reading the first page. There's a warehouse supervisor in Ohio who lost his job over an inventory discrepancy that was actually a software error nobody flagged for 8 months, he said. There's a delivery driver in Wisconsin who got blamed for a shipment delay caused by a mechanical failure our own maintenance division had been warned about twice. Renata, this isn't one bad year. This is a pattern your instincts found in about 6 hours that nobody on my payroll bothered looking for in 6 years. That's usually how it works, Renata said quietly. Nobody looks until someone who's been on the losing end tells them exactly where to look. One of the 7 cases belonged to a 22-year-old pharmacy technician who had misread an ambiguous chart during the same chaotic overnight shift that ended Renata's career, the same young woman Renata had spent 3 years quietly hoping had landed somewhere safe. Renata found her working retail at a pharmacy counter 40 minutes outside Duluth, cautious and guarded until Renata said one specific sentence that made the younger woman go pale and then, finally, cry, I never told anyone it was you. I want you to know that. I never will. Reyes Maritime terminated its relationship with Anchor Mutual publicly, 3 weeks later, alongside a policy statement committing to full third-party review of every claim involving frontline workers at partner institutions going forward. Grant Ashworth resigned from the board a month after that. He called Callum personally to do it, and Callum, to his own surprise, asked Renata to sit in on the call. I want you to understand this isn't about the money, Ashworth said stiffly, his voice smaller over the phone than it had been at 7 in the morning 3 weeks earlier. I built half of this foundation's financial architecture. I'm not going to sit on a board that treats a decade of relationships like collateral damage over one bad audit. It wasn't one bad audit, Renata said, before Callum could answer. It was 41 claims, Mr. Ashworth. 7 of them are people whose lives got smaller because it was cheaper for your architecture to close the file than to look at it. I don't need you to apologize to me. I'd just like you to say that part out loud, once, before you go. There was a long silence on the line. I won't be doing that, Ashworth said finally, and hung up. Callum looked at Renata across the table. That's about as close to accountability as men like him usually get, he said quietly. The silence, right before they hang up. I used to mistake it for humility. It's just cowardice with better manners. Then it's a good thing he's not the one redesigning the policy, Renata said. Renata signed her contract the same week the audit findings became public. Not as a guilt offering. As the person best qualified to make sure it never happened to anyone else quietly again. Renata said no the first time 3 weeks after signing her contract, when Callum gently raised the idea of Anna visiting Duluth. Not yet, she told him. I have work to do first. Real work. I don't want the first thing she sees to be me standing in a laundromat looking like something that needed saving. She said no the second time a month later, and this time the reason was harder to say out loud. I keep thinking she'll look at me and only see the worst night of her life, Renata admitted to Micah one evening, signing slowly, the way she always did when the words mattered more than the speed. I don't want to be that for her. I don't want to be a hospital bathroom every time she looks at my face. Micah considered this with the careful seriousness only a 9-year-old can fully commit to, small hand still for a moment before he signed back, did you stop being a nurse because helping her was wrong? Renata had no answer for that. She sat with the question for 2 full days, turning it over the way she used to turn over a difficult diagnosis, testing it from every angle until it finally landed somewhere she couldn't argue with. Helping Anna hadn't been the mistake. Believing, for 3 years, that she deserved to disappear because of what came after, that had been the mistake. 2 days later, she called Callum and told him to bring Anna to the laundromat. Anna walked in on a grey Tuesday afternoon, nervous in a way that made her look younger than 23, hovering near the door for a long moment as though she needed permission to cross the room. Renata set down the sweatshirt she was folding, the same gesture, the same stillness, as the night this whole story began, and simply nodded once. That was all it took. Anna crossed the room and hugged her, tightly, the way people hug someone they've thought about for years without ever having the chance to say so. You hummed down in the valley, Anna said into her shoulder, voice thick. I didn't even know the name of the song until last year. I just knew it was the only sound in the world that made me feel like I might be okay. You are okay, Renata said, blinking hard. You're more than okay. Micah, watching carefully from a few feet away, tugged his mother's sleeve and signed a question. Renata translated softly, her voice catching on the words. He wants to know if you're the reason his mom gets to help people again. Anna crouched to Micah's eye level, and though she didn't know a single sign, she pressed her palm flat over her heart and nodded slowly, deliberately, the one gesture that needed no translation at all. You did the hard part, Renata told her quietly. I just stayed in the room. I kept choosing to stay in that bathroom, Anna said, because someone showed me it was possible to be a mess and still be worth sitting beside.
Renata now leads worker health reform across Reyes Maritime's entire foundation, with real authority to investigate, not just recommend. The pharmacy technician she once protected in silence works alongside her, no longer hiding under another name, and the two of them have a standing rule in their department. No case closes in under 30 days without a second set of eyes that isn't an insurer's. Anna finished graduate school and started a peer support program for young people in crisis, funded quietly and named, at her insistence, the Humming Room. She calls Renata most Sundays, not to check in on the foundation but just to talk, the way people do, when the relationship has outgrown the reason it started. And on the anniversary of that blizzard, Sudsy's Wash and Fold still gets an anonymous delivery of new dryers and hot coffee, not because a billionaire needed to buy back a debt, but because some kindnesses, once you stop pretending you can pay them off, simply choose to keep going. Renata still tells new hires the same thing she used to tell frightened patients at 3 a.m, in a voice steady enough to make the whole room believe it. You don't have to fix everything tonight. You just have to stay long enough for someone to know they're not alone. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Somewhere out there, someone is folding laundry at 2 a.m, wondering if anyone even notices. Sometimes someone does.